Yo, I think it's just us two. I can't hear you.
Yo, yeah, I was wondering if anyone was going to show up.
Yeah, I think well, because Tristan's out, right?
Yeah,
John already went to the earlier one, so
yeah, yeah,
um,
yeah,
it's probably pretty dead. But yeah, I think everybody just we just talked about what was on the list and like probably gonna do it, whatever was on the list.
yeah.
TLDR.
How's
Um,
your knowledge graph stuff going?
I'm researching right now. I have that meeting um that I called um in like an hour
Mm.
or an hour and a half. God, this pollen is killing me. Sorry. Um, it's like super pollinated right now in Atlanta. So
Right.
I forget it's like the opposite season for you. But yeah, so it's going good. It's just there's three different problems we got to solve. I have half a mind to I don't know what chat we or code base is gonna be. Um, are you able to come to the one parser meeting or
Yeah, yeah.
okay, that'd be great. Because we'll talk about it more then. So that there, but still, regardless, we need to solve with chat with your code base with a bunch of stuff like um obtaining what has changed in your repository, right?
Mm.
So other vendors, I'll just say under other vendors, so we don't like get in trouble because this is recorded. Other vendors use essentially like a state tree of different files. And then I think when the user invalidates X number of files, they, reindex it or something like that, right? Um, I don't think we can do that um, with our current backend because we can't just like horizontally scale embed. I think maybe we can install horizontally scale embeddings. But um, so like if you think about it, like the way that chat with your code base and uh, the way that chat with your code base and knowledge graph do local invalidation are going to be very similar. Um, and like even part of me wonders for the knowledge graph if we should just replicate the entire graph locally because like for the knowledge graph if you change, let's say you wanted to keep it on the server, right? You do a query on the server, you'd have to, in order to have it be representative of the current state, you have to run it through every one of your files that have changed and update the graph on the server, essentially, because it's a graph data structure. Like you have different nodes that are pointing to each other. Um, unless you like took two different graphs, essentially, where you build a local graph from the changed files and you merge that local graph into the results of the server files. But even then, like we don't even know um like the server at that point would have to take maybe an endpoint to um take in the changes, if you will. I don't know. That's like it's like a really hard problem. So at that point, it's like maybe we should just write the entire graph for the editors on the client, right? Which
Mm.
is literally what DaVinci originally was.
Hmm.
But it was built with SQLite instead of like a graph. Um,
And I guess it's tricky as well because they are also going to want the server-side graph regardless for some of the other features, right?
yeah.
Yeah. And then then I guess you get back to sticking the whole thing in a binary and running the same thing in both places. Um, that would work. So you were saying the other vendors wait for a certain number of changes before they update. So are they doing like some kind of batching And so there's a window where their graph is not actually fully up to date.
Yeah, I think it's like I don't know. It was just from when I listened to their podcast with one
Mm.
of the vendors. They say they maintain like an index of the your index is based off of your file tree essentially, and they create a hash based off of the files. Probably file content is my guess. So like, just like Git, right? You create a hash of what is it called? Checksum hash or something,
Mm.
where like that. I think it will always generate the same hash, right? If the content is the same, is that the case? I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, it should be.
Um, so if the content, so it'll take create a hash of the content plus whatever header they added to it. I'm pretty sure they do something similar, where they have the hash of the file name, like the directory tree, and the content. And if n number of those hashes change, then they re-index that portion of it. And so when you do a query it still queries, the embeddings of XYZ, but also queries your changed contents on the server as well. But I don't think our servers can handle like, you know, depending on where we store it, right? Um, handle essentially doing everything on the server. And then also that you have to think about the data transfer too. Like Jan was
Mm.
telling me, people might not other companies might not like transferring hundreds of megabytes in changes.
Yeah.
Um,
And
so it's
potentially pretty consistently, like as you're typing, you're going to be churning like a lot of data just constantly.
yeah,
Tricky. And yeah, if you are going to build a whole graph locally just to send up the diff to the server, well, then you've already done all of the work of building the whole graph locally. Um, so it would kind of make sense to use that.
yeah. And that's the thing. I haven't even. I need to. I might just say like screw it and try to build the whole graph locally and get it working. Like replicate what they built in the current POC and do it. I don't know if I do it in JS.
Hmm.
I don't know. Um,
The current POC is Python, right?
yeah.
Is there any
Um,
way to make, is there like Python WASM bindings or anything like that? I guess it hasn't been built with that in mind,
why would you even want to do
just to
that?
use what's there, but yeah.
Yeah, that's true. That I could like, just yeah, I could try that. See, that might be like a quick dirty hack.
Hmm.
But I was thinking about just rewriting a lot. Like it's not really that complex. It's like
Yeah.
6 files of indexing logic. So
Hmm.
it shouldn't be too hard. Um, I was gonna try Go, but that's the thing also is like Rust would be ideal for the AST stuff because we have fine grained control. It has first class support for WASM and it has first class support for um uh oh, I don't know about Go, but yeah, it would be ideal for the language server side of things. I don't know what the support is, right? That's what my first task is like to see what's the level of support for a Go binary. But the
Hmm.
first thing I need to talk about, even with you and John, is what makes more sense? Does it make more sense to run the indexing logic in the language server runtime? Or does it make sense to run the indexing logic in a separate binary that talks via SD out? And do it
Hmm.
that way. Because the benefit of doing the indexing logic via SD out is that we can create a shim essentially for the graph database. So on Rails side, it can be the exact same query, um, and it's exact same indexing logic, but when it needs a file content, it fetches from Gitaly, and when it needs to save data to the graph database, it persists it to that. And then on the client, when it needs to save, data or read a file from the disk, it just reads it from the file system. And then when it needs data like or it needs to save the graph data, it just executes it to that like an embedded graph database, if you will.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I guess the main downside is then you're managing another process, but that's not too big
Yeah.
of a deal. It's kind of the opposite of what's happening with the workflow executor. That's kind of
That's also a thing. It's like Shakar's rewriting it in JavaScript, right? So,
yeah.
or you're going to
And
be writing in JavaScript.
yeah, um, maybe Lena as well. Sounds like she's joining the sub team.
Okay.
That's going to be cool. Yeah, I haven't looked at the issue yet this morning, but yesterday there was some discussion happening around should it be a separate binary? Should it be a library that the language server is just importing and using directly? And I guess
Mm.
for this indexer, it's a similar situation. Like one of the things that I said is that you could support both as well with a TypeScript library, is you could just have a main function that you can import and use as a library within the language server, or build it as a binary and have it run like
Wait,
just
say that again. What
independently.
do you mean?
Like the executor, like if they want first class like language server integration where it's just a library, then this library
Hmm.
just exports something that you run that starts listening, or it has a build that produces a binary that also runs that same entry point, so that when it's running in like the remote development environment, it can just spin up this binary without the full language server. But it's probably
Oh, you mean in
less.
the web IDE?
Yeah, yeah.
So is it possible to run a binary in the web IDE?
Uh, so I'm not sure if it's just the web ID on its own, but the remote development environment, I think, gives you more around the web IDE. Like I think it gives you a more featured
Oh,
environment.
okay.
I don't know too much about how that actually works, but I'm assuming that we will be able to run binaries and stuff in that environment. So it wouldn't work just in the straight web IDE in the website. Um,
Hmm. Okay. Yeah, I don't know. That's the thing. Like, what do you think would be better? Like running the indexing logic in the language server or
I think separate if we need to do it both. If we need to do it in the language server and on the back end, then having a separate process makes a lot of sense to me. Because I mean, we're never going to run the full language server on the back end, and so having that indexing available for both just makes a lot of sense.
Mhm. Yeah. I was hoping there was like some solution where we can store a majority of the data on the server, but like the thing is they want to go with Apache Age, or like they're thinking about going with Apache Age, and it's like putting a graph like in crazy graphs, like code-based graphs on Postgres is insane to me. Um, Something that just doesn't horizontally scale that well. Like, I don't know if they're gonna even run it on a separate, like for GitLab.com on a separate thing. I don't know what that would look like. They're gonna try it, the performance with millions of nodes and whatnot. Um,
Sorry, is this like a standalone thing or is it like a Postgres,
it's a
something you plug?
Postgres plugin,
Right.
and
Okay.
it's not even really well maintained either. Like last merge was like 6 months ago, with a
Right.
ton of issues. So I don't know what their plan is for that.
Interesting.
So it's either that or each customer has to spin up their own graph database. Um,
Right.
which makes me think like, I don't know, like, do we even need a graph? to get bang out of the buck.
Mm.
I don't,
Tricky. So who else is looking at the local side of it? Is it just you?
just me. Well, I think Maverick's intention is like to have you, me, and John. What she told me when she last left is she's gonna assign us all on you, me, and John, where we're all working close together essentially on very
Mm,
similar topics. So we can just figure it out together, and it's like we're working on the same thing together essentially.
mm,
Um, I think
yeah,
that's the plan. And then Shekar, I talked to Shekar and he was telling me he wants me on the same sub team you're on.
mm.
He was like, he said he was like, it would get much done much faster if like if it was you and Elwin. Um, so I thought that was funny, but I was like, I don't know if I want to deal with that, the chat team and stuff. Like, um, everybody there likes to comment and not really do much. So, um,
Yeah, it's been a little it's taken a little while to figure out what we're actually doing on the sub team for sure.
yeah.
Um,
So, so yeah, I don't know, like, and then also for the embeddings, chat with your code base. Like, if they want to semantically chunk, they're going to need to use the same logic where we get function calls and whatnot.
yep.
Either way, and if they're doing that, then I don't know, does it make sense for the indexer to be in a Go binary, even for the embeddings too? Um,
That's the part of it that I'm the least sure about, like how it's going to work, because I've also been talking about doing the whole thing just in the AI gateway.
what?
Uh, not, I haven't checked it recently, but I saw a discussion around basically using the current Duo chat rather than the new workflow backed Duo chat and sending some flag through that then the AI gateway would use to pull in a bunch of chat with your code base logic. Um,
Wait, what? I'm confused. Say that again?
so the how I understood the comment was that the discussion was around, are we going to be doing it in the current Duo chat or in this new workflow
Mhm.
Duo chat?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
to make it work in the current Duo chat, there would be some new flag that would be sent with the prompt that would say, this is a chat with your code base enhanced request. And then
That makes sense.
that would then cause the gateway or the back end to yeah, basically do additional searches and additional work to pull in that context.
Yeah, I'm talking about more the indexing of the embeddings. So
Right.
I think they're planning on indexing on semantic chunks. Shakar was saying what we should be doing is doing all three strategies. So chunk the entire document and let the LLM create the descriptions of the classes in there. Do semantic chunking with tree sitter, and then I forget what the third option was. We should try all three and then let the users pick which were the best results. Um, but either way, if they want to do option two, then they need to do a bunch of tree sitter logic. And
Mm,
so, and if you're doing that locally, like we need to think about, or if you're doing that at all, like we should not replicate tree sitter logic everywhere, like
mm,
in general.
yeah.
Even if it's on gateway, even if it's on, that's the thing. Also, if they want to do tree sitter stuff on gateway, then does it make sense for that to be there? Or sorry, does it make sense to write it in Go? Because Rust works well with Gateway and Python. Um, I don't know if you can call Go with Python. I don't know. Um,
Mm.
Python's written in C, isn't it? So maybe.
I'm
Um,
sure there must be some way. If Go is just a binary, then surely there's some pretty standard way. I mean, the
um,
main pushback against Rust is just there aren't as many people using it, right?
yeah, yeah.
And the main potential problem with Go is the tree setter bindings. not being as good.
Yeah, tree sitter bindings. Like we need to be able to support all the major languages, right?
Hmm.
I haven't explored yet how many languages are available in Go.
Hmm.
Um, and also bindings and just general portability, right? So like which
Mm.
language, which runtime can call what? Like, we know for sure Rust. I created like a POC based on what I found from this guy. He was able to, with some Clang flags, actually. You have to install Clang and like a few compilers, but essentially you build the project with a certain flag, and you can compile the tree sitter dependency. So you know how basically for right now the way it works is we compile it into WASM directly and then load it into JS.
Hmm.
Um, I wanted to see if there's a way that we can write it all in one language and then export that as WASM. So in Rust, you can import the tree sitter dependency like tree sitter Rust or tree sitter Zig or something, right? Write your traversal, parse the file with that dependency, including the C dependencies that are like the grammars and all that stuff. Run that. You can do the traversal logic, any AST logic you want to do, and return data. And you can compile that into WASM. And all of that, and you can do it across multiple languages. So I have a POC where it shows like 6 different languages, and it's compiling one string against all those languages, and then and it's only one WASM binary, which is like really
Hmm.
nice. I
That's
really
super
think we
nice.
should do that in general for our language server stuff.
Hmm.
But I need to see if it's possible to do that in Go, because it would be nice if we consolidated all of the AST stuff to one library, and then like all the stuff that I wrote in JavaScript for tree sitter, not you, the stuff that you wrote because yours is actual module resolution. It's not um,
The AST
parsing
parsing
files.
side, yeah.
We could just replace that with like something maintainable that's like, I'm not saying that's not maintainable, but just like having one parser, I think
Yeah.
would be huge.
Yeah.
Um,
Makes a lot of sense.
yeah,
Yeah.
I
Right.
gotta
So
explore that's I have to see if that's possible and Go, but I
yeah.
haven't. Yeah.
So if not, then we'd end up with a Go binary plus all of the tree sitter binaries.
Say that again.
If so, if we can't do what you were saying with Rust, we wouldn't end up with a single binary, a single Go binary that has everything embedded in it, right?
We what I was talking about is possible in Rust.
But you're not sure about Go yet.
Not sure about Go. Like basically you import the tree sitter language, do some tree sitter stuff in Go,
Hmm.
compile that to WASM. That's
Hmm.
what I'm trying to figure out.
Gotcha.
But again, like that's not as pressing if like we decide to do the embeddings, indexing, and the local knowledge graph stuff in a separate binary and Go, because
Mm.
it's a binary. It's not we don't need it to be WASM
Yeah.
necessarily.
Yeah.
But it'd also be cool like if we just ran the Go binary in WASM and just ran the indexer, right? But I don't know how like WASM, how well supported WASM like passing like a node file resolution is. You know what I'm saying? Like you'd have to pass in the JS binding, I think, for reading a file, right? I'm assuming.
So you're talking about the actual resolution once the parsing's happened, like doing all of that in it as well?
Yeah, like the reading the file, and whatnot. Um,
Uh, I'm not sure, to be honest.
yeah.
Yeah, mm. It feels like it would be possible. I'm not sure though. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, that's the thing we have to figure out. Like, should we manage a separate binary? Should we not? Um,
I think
luckily,
regardless of how we use it, it should be built. I feel like it should be built to be a separate binary. Like that just makes so much sense. Like we're gonna need to do this work on the server. We're gonna need to do it potentially in this remote development environment, which is not going to be running. Well, maybe it would be running the language server, but it'll be a separate environment. I just don't see why we wouldn't build it as a portable binary. It just makes so much sense for future proofing and flexibility.
mhm. I mean, I like both languages, so I don't really care.
Hmm.
I don't have a too much of a stake. I just know tree setter is very well supported um, in Rust because it literally is written in Rust.
Hmm.
Um, but I was planning on like trying to hack together something with Go and Wasm and just like set up the. I actually have an existing Go project. Um, I wrote DaVinci in Go, actually, believe it or not, the
All right.
original DaVinci. I don't know if you ever saw that. I think that was before you came to Editor Extensions.
No.
Um, did you ever see the original DaVinci thing that I made?
No.
Really?
Not the original, no. I think I
So,
all the stuff I was seeing was when that had been turned into epics to start building it into the language server.
so DaVinci, the original DaVinci, um, was like the imports, right? And then the third thing that I did that was like the biggest thing that I did was it would I got it in JavaScript working. It would index this a code base like the monolith in like less than 4 minutes. Um, and what it would do is it was like really hard engineering problem actually to solve because I spun up like 10 workers or something like that. And they're Node.js workers, and every worker would go and parse each file, extract the tags, so all the function definitions, class definitions, types, and um, extract that data, and then I would pass that data back to the main thread, and the main thread would save that data into a SQLite database. And I had to do that in a thread safe way, so the writes only would happen sequentially for each file, essentially.
Mhm.
And so yeah, I got that indexing, and then essentially when you go to the query it, um, you would be on a file, you start typing and do ask a code suggestion. What it would do is get all the current references, so all the function calls and class calls and inspect the database for those definitions and look up the line numbers that they're defined on, read those files according to those line numbers where it's defined, and add that as context. That's what DaVinci was essentially.
That's
Um,
super nice. Yeah.
um, and
So
that exactly is what the knowledge graph is. It's a graph structure versus, and I tried the graph structure originally, but
yeah. Were you including the full file that contained that reference or just the chunk?
and I wasn't even storing the chunk. I was just storing like the database would look like the function definition, the uh what was it? Okay, so the language, it was the file name, language, function definition, node type, so like
Mhm.
class, function, type, etc. And the what was the last thing? And line numbers
Right.
for that full definition of the class. All right. So it'd
Mhm.
be if the class was like line 100 to 200, then it would store 100, beginning line, end line, 100,
Mhm.
200. And then when you go to query, and if it matches that, and it was really fast because like
Mhm.
monolith, it was like 1.5 gigabytes of data. But on SQLite, it was able to match like query matches in like 200 milliseconds, less than that,
Mm.
because it was I just indexed everything very well. So like indexed like, uh the what did I index? Language, sorry, the language, and I did a few other indexes. I have to like go and find the code, but um yeah, it matched it pretty fast, like surprisingly fast. Like if the function definition matched another function definition.
Hmm.
Oh, because I would index also the function definition, right? So if you had like three hits or something for references. It's kind of like LSP in a way. Like I was mimicking what an LSP does,
Hmm.
right? It's just without using the compiler, and it's just good enough to get the LLM good context.
Yeah,
Um,
that sounds
so
pretty good.
the knowledge graph is that, but with a graph structure.
I did a shitty version of that in my chat app, like just via tool calling, and basically gave it the ability to see a full file tree of the repo, and then for each file, all of the publicly exported symbols, and like nothing beyond that. It was pretty basic, but that was enough that it would be able
You
to
pretty well,
link
yeah,
up
traverse.
things and then read the files using the other
Yeah,
tools, and it worked pretty well. So I can imagine that a proper version of that would be pretty slick.
yeah. That's what I'm saying. Like, do we even need like a graph? Like, I don't know. Like,
Mm,
makes me think if a graph is truly necessary.
mm,
Oh, for the purposes of what we're doing. But either way, you still have to parse and index
yep.
it.
I mean,
So,
that's the key part. That's the part that gets the data in a structured format that you can then do whatever with. Um, yeah, I don't know. I don't know much about doing that stuff through a graph database.
so that's the problem I have to solve is like, um, where should we run it? And then also the other issue, which is should we be using should we continue using isomorphic it? Um, because we can't do simple trivial things like which files have changed without running like a 200 like a God, my eyes are killing me. Like a 20-second query and blocking the main thread, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah, I don't know that. It seems, yeah. I still don't really get the security concerns with it. Like, it just seems so sensible to make use of actual Git. Like, rewriting all of that stuff is kind of bonkers. Like, just in terms of the amount of code to support what we could just get
right.
from a couple of CLI commands. Yeah.
Exactly. And simple Git looks pretty good. And it looks like it handles some security stuff. The main part is the sanitization and ensuring that we execute places. And then the other problem is Git versions, right? But I just feel like we would solve those problems as we increase usage, right?
Hmm.
If you look at like that's what Tomas was telling me to look at. I'll send it to you. Um, like the VS Code actual, like how VS Code does Git is what they
Hmm.
do. Is they do the exact same thing. So they wrap Git, the Git shell, and they have a bunch of different things around um, uh, like for all the different things that you'd want to do, like get remotes or get status or get a diff, right? Um, they do have some sanitization in there, so maybe we can like steal it. But I mean, I don't know. Does this seem like a lot of code? It feels like it's not. I feel like it's not that much code that they have in here. Um, and a lot of it's not even like applicable to us. Like blame is not really.
Hmm.
I mean, it would be nice if we had that in our LSP.
Yeah, it's not
Uh,
too bad. Um, we're not going to be doing like anything with remotes or commits, or like we'll have a way smaller surface area.
hmm.
Let's see.
And then the repository service becomes super simple because then we don't need to parse anything.
Hmm.
We just find all the Git configs, and I mean, maybe we can do that because it's pretty performant, like still parse the Git config, but um handle everything else with Git. I feel like there's some things we probably do want to keep, like submodules. I created this parser for submodules. Um, but some things we do want to call with Git shell.
Hmm. I wonder how Git authentication would work if we were using like a bundled simple Git, like if they had authentication set up through their system Git. I guess if we're not fetching or anything, it's not a problem if we're just using it for parsing the current repo.
For authentication, I mean, it should, if you have SSH, then it should be okay, right? Because it's just calling Git directly.
Hmm.
If you call the shell,
Hmm.
right?
True. Yeah. Yep.
Um, yeah,
Interesting.
I'll send you Git, simple Git. And there was already a CVE that they solved. So it looks like there are researchers and there's like 5 million downloads.
Is this
Uh,
VS Code Git extension a standalone package?
I wish I was researching how to do that. You know what's really cool is Cody actually implemented VS Code in their LSP. I'll send it to you. Like, if you look at their LSP, they're literally importing VS Code and like running VS Code commands and stuff like that
That's wild.
in their LSP. And there's like something like VS Code shim. Um, very interesting. Um,
I wonder, yeah, man, how heavy is that? That's pretty cool though, because then you can use all of the resolution
all
stuff
the
and
yeah,
yeah.
document stuff, and
I mean, VS Code is not super heavy, but it's not super light either.
I'm pretty sure it's millions of files.
Um, Interesting approach.
Yeah. So I'll create an issue for that, and then we can figure out a solution because we need to do that we need to do it like ASAP. Like we need to be able to see what files have changed very, very soon.
Mhm.
Um, like be able to run that query. And something that didn't help, like give me too much confidence, is I did a fresh clone of the GitLab monolith. And so I did a fresh clone of the GitLab monolith and checked out what did I do? So I did a fresh clone of the GitLab monolith. I wrote like a quick script that was implementing the thread that I shared with you, like how to get changes. And it can't even parse the Git index from like a freshly cloned SSH GitLab monolith. It like just fails. It says like cannot access null. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like,
Mhm. Yeah,
so didn't inspire too much confidence.
yeah.
I don't know. And part of me thinks like we should like create the issue, but I don't see like it like it could be that the security researchers find issues. That's the thing is like, at least based on what Greg has said, like security stuff isn't necessarily blocking unless it's like a Sev 1. But I don't know. We don't obviously want to introduce like a Sev 1 type of security
Hmm.
issue.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Hmm. All right. I might jump off and get some coffee before this next thing starts up.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. Anyways, thanks for the TED talk. Appreciate the
Yeah,
help.
all good. I'll see you soon.
Bye bye.